Welcome to the Happy Mama Movement podcast. I'm Amy Taylor-Kabbaz, mama, journalist, coach, and founder of Mama Rising. This podcast is a space of community and collaboration. We gather stories of matrescence, motherhood, womanhood, and change told by our Mama Rising coaches and mothers around the globe, in the knowing that through our stories, we can begin to heal and change the way the world sees, values, and supports mothers everywhere. So, welcome to the Happy Mama Movement.
Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to the 300th episode of the Happy Mama Movement podcast. 300 episodes. It's mind-blowing, especially because this is my second podcast on motherhood. Before this one, I had Happy Mama with Amy, and I think we had over 200 episodes in that podcast as well. In other words, that is hours and hours and hours of speaking to mamas all over the globe at all stages of motherhood with all different experiences. And I feel so incredibly privileged that I've been able to do that. But I wanted to take this moment in time to reflect with all of you on a couple of things. First of all, about the growth in awareness of matrescence since I first began. Many of you know my story very well, that my eldest daughter started all of this when I crash landed into motherhood completely unprepared for not only the act of mothering, but what it would mean for me personally, how it would change me. I assumed it wouldn't. I assumed I would still be Amy Taylor-Kabbaz. I would still be all of me. I would just now have a baby on my hip. And as is well known by now, the reality of that sent me into such a time of questioning, a time of self-doubt, a time of true isolation. Because 17 years ago, there was no conversations like this. There were no Facebook groups or Instagram pages talking about the identity of the mother. There were certainly no conversations in the workplace about the realities of balancing babies with work. There was no preparation for how it might change my marriage, my feelings about my body, myself, my friends, my own family, none of it. But being the deep questioning person that I always have been, these questions just bubbled up inside of me so instantaneously. I have seen a couple of times now the video of me just maybe 1 or 2 hours after my daughter was born in the hospital room. My dad with his handy cam came in, and the first time I saw that video, it would have been maybe 14 years after she was born. I couldn't watch it. I looked at my face as I still laid in the hospital bed. I was still in the room that she was delivered in. I still could hardly feel my legs from the epidural that I had to have. And I was in such shock. The look on my face broke my heart. I looked like I had no idea what had just happened to me. And that's why I'm here. That's why I do what I do now, because that look on my face brought back such a flood of memories, of emotions, of sensations in my body. It was really confronting. But since then, so much has begun to change. I started asking questions about what happens to a woman when she becomes a mother. I think my daughter was not even 1 year old when my first article was published in a national magazine here in Australia, asking that exact question: what happens to a woman when she becomes a mother? Not physically, but emotionally and psychologically, her identity, what changes, what shifts. That was 16 years ago now. And I am certain that that's what I am put on this planet to ask. There's a few other things that I'm put on this planet to be and to ask, but that definitely is the headline. And for a really, really long time, I didn't think I would find the answer. And of course, eventually, 10 years later, I did. I found the word matrescence. And I knew that that word had the potential to heal and to change so much. I knew that if the world understood matrescence in its true definition and form, the world would change. Because if we begin to look at mothers differently and how we support them and acknowledge them and value them, then that would flow on to everything else in the world. We would look at how we care for each other. We would restructure our workplaces. We would look after the planet better. We would prioritize the care economy rather than profit. I just knew that this was the answer. And although I had great success sharing that with mamas around the world, it didn't go beyond that for a very long time either. But in the last few years, something has shifted. The awareness around matrescence is enormously growing. It is rapidly becoming part of the zeitgeist. It is starting to permeate into parts of the conversation, into parts of the world. That is incredibly exciting. I mean, we still don't have Google recognizing it when you type it into a Google Doc. We'll get there. But it is in the Cambridge University Dictionary, and it is being discussed in doctors' circles and mothers' groups and workplaces in a very small way to start off with, but we're getting there. But what I really wanted to say to mark this 300th episode is we can't let this just be a flash in the pan hashtag. This awareness, this understanding of matrescence as a biopsychosocial transformation, as a psychological rite of passage, as a transformative experience, physically, emotionally, culturally, socially, economically, all of it. We have to ensure that when we talk about matrescence, we back it up. We acknowledge the cultural and social structures around it that must change. And what I mean by that is this can't just be another ask of mothers for self-care. This can't just be a postpartum care plan and meal sharing plan and flexible work when they return to work. What gets me so excited and so passionate about this is by sharing with the world what matrescence is, there is an invitation here to really, truly, deeply change the structure around families and mothers and community in our world. Because the way I see it is matrescence has been ignored and dismissed and not even studied until very, very recently because it was invisible. It was assumed that she would just know what to do and she would be happy to do it. And there was this pressure to ignore it because we are told that we can't just grow up and want to be a mother. We have to do so much more in this world. And so the experiences, the reality of mothering has been completely dismissed and ignored and hidden. So when we talk about matrescence, we're not only talking about the individual changes that she goes through, her personal experience of the physical, hormonal, economic, cultural, relationship changes, all of it, her deep, deep transformation that she experiences and continues to experience as she moves through motherhood. But we also have this beautiful opportunity to use this insight to question how we're doing life, how we're caring for each other, how we structure our workplaces, how we structure our health system, how we structure our schools, how we structure everything. So what I really want to portray today is this deep desire to make matrescence more than just a understanding of how she's experiencing the first few years of motherhood and what we can do to help her. What this is asking us to do is to bring forward all the invisible parts of caring in our world that are ignored and underpaid and assumed. That if we start to acknowledge how we are expected to do all of this, then we also look at how we are expected to look after our parents, how we're expected to work no matter whether we're sick or have a mental health challenge. It asks us to look at so much more. And it needs depth. My worry is probably a bit of a strong word. My concern is that we have this opportunity to shine a light on something that has been so dismissed, literally not even studied properly. There are only a handful of motherhood studies courses in universities around the world. That's just mind-blowing to me. How could we not have an enormous body of evidence and research and data into the maternal brain? How is it possible that the maternal brain and how it is changed through motherhood hasn't been studied until the late 2017, 18, around that time? How is it even possible that we don't have whole departments of universities dedicated to caring and motherhood and the systems around it? So what we really need in this moment, and if you're a mama listening to this and you're just trying to figure out how to do this for yourself, and the idea of changing a whole political system around better supporting carers is a little too much for your exhausted body at the moment, I understand. I really do. But the way that you interpret matrescence and use your voice to speak about it and advocate for yourself and make the invisible more visible, whether it's in your relationship at home, with your in-laws, in the workplace, with your friends, we're all contributing to this tidal wave of change that we could be on the edge of. But here's what's happened so often in the past. These issues are dismissed as women's issues and fall to the wayside. We can't let that happen. I don't think we will, to be honest. All day, every day, I speak to mothers around the world and I feel this grumbling underneath the surface of a deep knowing that something has to change. And thanks to things like social media, we won't be quiet about it anymore. I think the backlash from the burnout from COVID, where the whole world expected, mostly the mothers and the women, to carry the load of remote learning and caring for each other and trying to keep your job, have babies in isolation, not have any childcare or any support. I think it was the straw that broke the camel's back, and the camel has been carrying a lot for thousands of years. and the straw has broken it now. And I really think that we're in a time where we could do something really powerful with this. And this word and this incredible understanding and insight that really began with the work of my phenomenal mentor and teacher, Dr. Aurelie Athen, we all are carrying this now. You may have heard me say this before. I say it often. We need a revolution in the way that we support and value mothers. We need a revolution, which is a changing of the guard. It's a breakdown of the current system for a better one. And when you look in history, throughout history, all revolutions began by the people who were the most oppressed by the current system. So this is a motherhood revolution we have right now. And each and every one of us around the world are playing our part. We're all part of that revolutionary army. When we push back, when we say no, when we hold firm to our boundaries, when we speak our truth, and like I said, make the invisible that we've been hiding for so long about how hard this is or how unfair the system is. We need to make that visible now. And I believe the next generation will really see that. I think they're already the ones that are shaking systems around the world, for goodness sakes. But as their mothers and carers, I deeply believe that that's our job, that we are here to take the mask of motherhood off and say, this doesn't work. To expect me to parent and carry everything in isolation without the support and structure that is required of the village, of community, of physical and mental support, it doesn't work. Just this week, it's the 5-year anniversary of the first COVID lockdown, and I've been reflecting on that a lot too. I know for most of us, probably every single one of you listening, that was such a challenging, scary, confronting time. There were gifts within it, of course. But when I think back to the responsibility and heaviness that so many of us felt with little ones or pregnant mamas, it's just, it fills me with sadness and then anger. And if you feel like that, I also want to particularly say to you today, I listen to mums every day. And the mothers who had babies during the pandemic, they have a particular type of trauma. They have a particular wound. It makes me emotional because when I speak to these beautiful, brave women, they really feel like the system let them down. Now, I had my babies way before the pandemic, 17, 15 and 11 years ago, and I felt completely unsupported and scared out of my mind and isolated and lonely. And I had everything that I could possibly have access to right at my fingertips. And yet it still felt so incredibly lonely and hard. So to then have a baby during the pandemic, and what I hear from those women is a real sense of the world has just moved on. And there is this wound now that by no means I think has healed and scarred over yet. It's still fresh for so many of you. And I genuinely mean this. I'm deeply sorry we did that. I'm deeply sorry that we allowed so many of you to become mothers, maybe for the first time or again, in that way, without support, without people in the room, without family visiting afterwards to help, without the local library where you could take your baby on the really tough days so your toddler could at least go to, in my neighborhood, it was called baby rhyme time. I don't know how I would have got through 2 toddlers and a newborn without my local community services like that. And you had none of that. So that's also what I really wanted to acknowledge with this 300th episode, is on top of the responsibility that we have to make sure that matrescence is not just this flash in the pan Instagram moment, that it is grounded in policy and research and data and real change. I also really want to acknowledge that for many of us, for many of you, there is another layer that the world needs to see. There is another layer of burnout and exhaustion and sadness and perhaps anger of what you've been through. And I deeply believe that if we make sure the first point is done properly, what I mean is if we make sure that matrescence is taken seriously and is listened to by as many people as possible, then the second point of the healing of those wounds will also be achieved. I haven't spoken to a single woman over the last 16 years of researching about motherhood who doesn't believe that if they had known about this, it would have been different. Not one single woman. Whether she is now a grandmother or whether she is pregnant with her first child, whether she went through IVF and fertility treatments, whether she had terminations and miscarriages, whether she adopted a child, whether she's in a same-sex relationship, whether she's in Kenya or Sydney. This understanding changes things. And I'm really, really hopeful that if we can hold on to our core knowing about that and shout it from the rooftops in our own way and demand the money to research and understand this deeper, to walk into offices in major corporations around the world and tell them to listen, I think it's going to be different. I think we're at the turning point. It's going to be long. We are undoing so many decades of the invisible load of motherhood and the invisibility of a woman's work, a woman's worth, and a woman's body. But I really think we're here, and it will come and it will happen. So in your own beautiful way, I hope that you can place that in your heart, knowing that if you didn't have the best experience of becoming a mother, if you're still moving through so much processing and trying to figure out how the hell can I juggle all of this? What's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong? Why does it seem so hard? Please know, please place it in your heart that I have a deep belief that the change is coming, and we will make sure that never again in the experience of becoming a mother will be so isolated and invisible and misunderstood. That is my hope and my prayer on this 300th episode. Thank you. So many of you have been here since the very first episode. Some of you have even been here from the first podcast. You read my first book and my second book. You've been a part of my community for so long. I consider you my true community, my village. And I wouldn't be here knowing with such certainty what is possible when women gather together with the understanding of matrescence if you hadn't shown me. You trusted me with this. You still do. You let me know all the time what you're doing and how this work is changing you and what somebody said when you shared what matrescence was. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We are the army of change for mothers everywhere. Thank you so much.
Thanks, as always, for being a part of our global Matrescence community. Please take a moment and make sure you're subscribed to this podcast in your podcast player so you can always be notified of our next episode. And if you would like to work with a coach on your own experience of matrescence, please go to mamarising.net and explore our directory of phenomenal coaches, workshop leaders, space holders and facilitators around the globe. You can also explore our Global Matrescence Foundation and consider donating so a mama in need can access the support of one of our coaches and still ensure that our coaches receive the income and support they need so they can continue to work in this way. And finally, if you would like to be a coach, a facilitator and a matrescence activist in your own community, jump on our waitlist for our next intake of the Mama Rising Facilitator Training at mamarising.net. Thank you for being here and being part of this movement. Until next week, bye.